Okay, so I'd like to thank Jonathan and GeoMatics for providing me with the opportunity to present to you today. The title of my talk is Canadian Geodetic Survey, Supporting Accurate Geospatial Positioning in Canada. Here's the outline for my talk. I'll give an overview of spatial reference systems, reference frames, and epochs, and how these all fit together and why they're important to you. I'll highlight the currently adopted reference frames in Canada. I'll outline the Canadian Geodetic Survey, or CGS's services that may be of interest to geospatial users. These include products to access the currently adopted reference frames, as well as products to work with data from legacy reference frames or from international reference frames. And finally, I'll finish off by giving a high-level overview of the reference system modernization plans that are coming in North America. So who is the Canadian Geodetic Survey? Well, we're part of the Surveyor General branch of Natural Resources Canada, and we're responsible for providing the geodetic reference system for the country, for Canada. This includes defining the system, maintaining it, and providing access to it for geospatial users. We've been around for quite a long time. CGS was officially established by an order in council, which was signed by then Prime Minister Sir Wilfrid Laurier on April 20th, 1909. So we've been around for more than 100 years. And although some of the techniques and the tools that we use for defining the reference system and providing access to it have changed, our mandate hasn't changed over these more than 100 years. So what is a spatial reference system? Well, as we know in the geospatial community, all positioning is with respect to something, whether it's coordinates for a point on the ground, if it's a map, a georeference map, or georeference data set. All these positions are relative to something. And for survey and mapping, geoscience, and many other applications, we use what's called a geodetic reference system. Really, anyone who needs precise positioning or who needs repeatable positioning time after time rely on these geodetic reference systems. And the components of these systems include the origin, the 3D orientation in space, and the scale of the system. They also include a reference ellipsoid with a specific size and shape. So these spatial reference systems rarely change, and that's because a change to a reference system can have significant impacts on many, many users. But as measuring techniques improve and the demand for more accurate data increases, these reference systems do sometimes change. And it's mainly when systematic errors are determined in the existing system. So sometimes maybe once per generation, there is a requirement to update a spatial reference system. An example of this would be on the horizontal side when we moved from NAT 27 to NAT 83 in Canada, or more recently on the vertical side when we moved from CGPD 28 to CGPD 2013 in Canada. So modern spatial reference systems have three components. There's a geometric reference system, which provides the latitude, the longitude, and the height above the ellipsoid. There's also the height reference system, which provides the orthometric height, or the height above mean sea level. And then there's the gravity reference system, which provides the gravity standards for the country. So I won't talk further about the gravity reference system, but I will talk a lot about the geometric and height reference systems in Canada. Sometimes we also hear about reference frames. So what's a reference frame? Well, the geodetic reference frame is the physical realization of a reference system. The reference system is really the concepts, and the frame is the physical realization. So it's defined typically by the coordinates assigned to markers on the ground. So the geodetic control markers on the ground have published coordinates, and that's what realizes the geodetic reference frame. The reference systems, as I mentioned, are rarely updated, maybe once a generation or even less frequently. But reference frames are updated more frequently as new data, models, and techniques become available. So maybe once every 5-10 years, there's a new realization of a reference frame. So the current reference frames having been adopted in Canada are NAT 83 CSRS version 7. For the geometric frame, and for the vertical reference frame, it's CGPD 2013, CGG 2013A, where CGG 2013A denotes the realization of this vertical reference frame, or the geoid model that's used to realize this frame. And on the geometric side, the version 7 denotes the realization of this NAT 83 CSRS reference system. Then the one final complicating factor is that the Earth is a dynamic planet, and positions change all the time. Positions change in time. This can be from dramatic events, for example, an earthquake, or it can be from more subtle motions, for example, just the ongoing tectonic plate motion. So when we realize a reference frame, it's adopted at a specific epoch in time. So an example of this would be NatGd CSRS version 7, epoch 2010. And the same on the vertical side, where an example would be CGPD 2013, CGG 2013A, epoch 2010. So what's really important to point out at this point is that maintaining accurate metadata is essential. Indicating the reference frames and epochs for all coordinates and geospatial files is the only way to truly have data sets that can be integrated seamlessly with other data sets or over time, or shared amongst different users. You need to know the reference system as well as the reference frame or the realization and the epoch from which these positions are determined. So the current geometric reference system adopted in Canada is NatGd CSRS, and there's a few different ways to access this. I just highlighted a few of the services that are provided. One is, as I mentioned, the published coordinates. Another way to access this is NRCan has a positioning service called CSRS PPP, where users can collect GNSS data in the field and submit it to this online freely available service, where it gets processed and your precise positions get returned in the NatGd CSRS system. So that's an efficient way to collect data and ensure that it's accurate and in the adopted reference system. There's also many commercial services. There's these RTK services, both public and commercial, and these are commonly used now for precise positioning and for accessing the reference system. NRCan has a compliance program with the commercial providers of RTK services, where if they're interested, they can provide their data to us, and we'll process it, provide them with official NatGd CSRS coordinates that they can use in their RTK reference stations to ensure that it's properly integrated into the national reference frame, NatGd CSRS. And then also we have a coordinate transformation tool called TRX, which allows users to transform coordinates between the various realizations of the international reference frame, ITRF, and NatGd CSRS. What about working with heights in Canada? Well, in 2013, Canada adopted a geoid-based height reference system called CGPD 2013, and this replaced the former leveling-based height system, CGPD 28. And the most accurate way to access CGPD 2013 is through a combination of GNSS and the gravimetric geoid model, CGG 2013A. You can see this image on the right depicts how the formula for this. So you collect your GNSS, you process it, you get your accurate height above the ellipsoid, small h, then you subtract the geoid height, which comes from the CGG 2013A model, and ellipsoidal height minus geoid height provides you with the orthometric height in CGPD 2013 system. This geoid model is available in CGS's height transformation tool, GPSH, and it's also available for download, so you can integrate it into your own applications. In Canada, delivering the reference system is a shared responsibility. However, CGS is responsible for defining and maintaining the system, but providing access to the system is really shared. And it's mainly shared to the Canadian Geodetic Reference System Committee, a subcommittee of the Canadian Council on Geomatics. So this committee is comprised of federal, provincial, and territorial partners who provide geodetic reference systems in Canada. So mainly the federal government, the provincial governments, and some territorial governments. But also at the same time, municipalities, academia, and even the commercial providers of positioning services play a role in providing access to the reference system in Canada. So with all these different groups providing access, it can become complicated for geospatial professionals. So what are some of the challenges? Well, the biggest challenge is that across Canada, there are different geometric and height system epochs that have been adopted. You see this image on the right with the map of Canada and the color coding. It shows the different versions of NatGd CSRS which have been adopted, but some of these versions also have different reference epochs, which is an even bigger challenge. So you can see that there's 4 different versions of NAT83 CSRS that have been adopted, and there's 3 different reference epochs that have been adopted in different jurisdictions across the country. And not only this, but then some other stakeholder groups are still working in legacy systems. For example, there's municipalities that are still working in NAT27 or NAT83 originals. There's a lot of data sets out there that are in various systems or epochs within the official NAT83 CSRS system. So how do you integrate all these geospatial data sets from different sources together? Well, CGS does provide some products and some tools which can help to bring these disparate data sets together. And the first tool that we provide is a national velocity model. And this is used to support epoch transformations in Canada. So on the last slide, I showed that there's different adopted epochs across Canada. This is challenging, but we do have a national model which can be used to propagate data sets or propagate coordinates from different epochs. So using this national model, you can transform data sets from one epoch to another in Canada. The format of this national velocity model is, it's an NTV2 type grid, but it's been extended because it's a 3D grid, so it also includes the vertical velocity for Canada. In 2019, we released a new version of the national velocity model called version 7. It was released with NAT83 CSRS version 7. And for the first time, we're now able to finally recommend using this national velocity model even for propagating coordinates in northern Canada and the territories. So it was a big endeavor, but we finally have a national velocity model which we feel is accurate enough to be used for propagating coordinates anywhere in Canada. And I should also mention that this velocity model has been incorporated into CGS tools like TRX, the coordinate transformation tool. You can propagate coordinates using this tool, and it uses this national velocity model. And it's also incorporated into our PPP service, so users can submit data and select their desired epoch for their results, and we'll use this national velocity model to propagate to that epoch and provide them results in their desired epoch. What about working with legacy reference systems? What if you have data sets in NAT27 or vertical data sets in CGPD 28? Well, we do provide some support along with the provincial geodetic agencies. On the horizontal side, we support legacy systems through these NTV2 format grid shift files. But the issue is we don't have national models to go between all these legacy systems. Between NAT27 and NAT83, we do have a national model, NTV2 2.0. But to go to various versions of CSRS or between in the Maritimes between ATS 77 and CSRS, we don't have sort of national coverage of these horizontal grid shift files. Many provinces have developed grid shift files for their jurisdiction, but there's, like I said, in an example where we don't have these grid shift files would be in northern Canada. In the territories, there's a grid shift file from 27 to NAT83 original, but there's no grid shift files to bring you to NAT83 CSRS. So there is some limitations to this support. And we look on the vertical side, what we've developed is a national conversion grid between CGPD 28 and the new geodetic datum CGPD 2013. So how this conversion grid was created is the difference between the hybrid geoid model, which was used to access CGPD 28, HTV2, which you may be familiar with, and the current gravimetric geoid model for CGPD 2013, CGG 2013. So the difference between CGG 2013A and HT version 2 was developed into a conversion grid, which can be used for bringing data sets forward from CGPD 28. See this image on the right shows the difference nationally between these two vertical reference systems. You can see it varies from East Coast to West Coast by about a meter and a half East Coast to West Coast. So what about working between NAT83 CSRS and the international reference systems? Well, The CGS does provide official transformation parameters, Helmer transformation parameters, to allow users to transform between NAT83 CSRS and the various realizations of the ITRF. And you can see the difference in the horizontal between these two systems on the right here. Also, what about WGS84? We get lots of requests from users wondering how they can transform to or from WGS84. Well, WGS84 has evolved over the years, but the latest version, WGS84 G1762, where the G1762 denotes the GPS week of this realization, is tied to ITRF 2008 at the centimeter level. So if you want to transform NAT83 CSRS to WGS84, or vice versa in the latest realization, then you can use the official transformation parameters between ITRF 2008 and NAT83 CSRS. So here's a summary of the different transformations and conversion models that are available, and these are all available for download from the CGS website. So there's the Helmer transformations, the official 7 and 14 parameter transformations between NAT83 CSRS and the ITRF for the various realizations of ITRF. There's the national velocity model that I talked about, this extended NTV2 type model, which can be used for propagating coordinates between different epochs within either NAT83 CSRS or ITRF in Canada. There's the geoid models, the official CGG 2013A geoid model, as well as the legacy geoid models. And these can be used for converting heights between ellipsoidal and orthometric. There's also the height system conversion grid that I mentioned for converting orthometric heights between CGPD 28 and 2013. And then there's the various NTV2 type grid shift files that are available across the country. So these are all available for download from the CGS website. So now I'm going to shift gears a little bit. That's the current situation in Canada and how we are helping users work from between legacy and current and between international and NAT83 CSRS. But I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about something that's coming, and that's reference system modernization. The US is planning to modernize their spatial reference system as early as 2024 or 2025. And as part of this modernization, they're planning to replace NAT83, their currently adopted geometric reference system, with a new geometric reference system called NatRef 2022, or the North American Terrestrial Reference Frame of 2022. They're also planning to replace their current vertical reference system, Natgd 88, North American Vertical Datum of 1988, with a new vertical datum called Natgd 2022, or the North American Pacific Geopotential Datum of 2022. So what is NatRef 2022? How will it be defined? Well, it's going to be equivalent to the latest ITRF at epoch 2020. So at epoch 2020, the coordinates in ITRF, the latest ITRF, probably ITRF 2020 and NatRef 2022 will be identical. So it'll be exactly the same at epoch 2020. But then it'll be kept fixed to the North American plate using a plate motion estimate. So moving away from 2020, moving forward, the two systems will drift apart. The US is planning to have a three-dimensional velocity model like Canada's, which will account for any residual or local motions. And this will be, it'll be used for propagating coordinates between epochs in NatRef 2022, similarly to the way we do it in NAT83 CSRS currently. So just to sort of summarize, NatRef 2022 will have a very similar definition to NAT83 CSRS, except for one really big important point, and that's that it'll be geocentric because it's going to be equivalent to ITRF. So NAT83 CSRS is not quite geocentric. It's off by about 1.5 meters. So NAT83 CSRS and NatRef 2022, although compatible, won't be the same. There'll be a horizontal difference between the two systems of about 1 to 2 meters across Canada. Same in ellipsoidal heights. What about Natgd 2022? Well, it's going to be a geoid-based height reference system. It's actually going to have the same definition as CGPD 2013, which is really good news. And the goal is also to have the same realization in Canada and the US. So the goal is to have one geoid model that can be used for both Canada and the US to realize NatGd 2022/CGPD 2013 at that time. This would allow for a smooth transition across the Canada-US boundary. One difference currently between their plan and CGPD 2013 is that they plan to have a dynamic component to the geoid model. So the geoid changes are pretty small year over year, about 1 to 2 millimeters per year. But the U.S. is planning to take this into account in their modernization plan. So that's something that, if Canada continues to consider the geoid model static, would be different between our two countries. But at the centimeter level, these two systems will be compatible. So if we look at the impacts on this reference system modernization, I guess the bad news is that NatRef 2022 and NAT83 CSRS will differ by about 1 to 2 meters horizontally, and this will need to be accounted for in many geospatial applications. But on the good news side, on the vertical side, NatGd 2022 and CGPD 2013 will be compatible at the centimeter level, so that's good news. And on the geometric side, CGS will certainly support NatRef 2022. It'll be integrated into all our products and services. And we're in discussions right now with stakeholders as concerning adoption of NatRef 2022 in Canada. We do think it would be a good idea, but we're trying to hear from our stakeholders to see what impacts this would have for them and what we would need to do to help them adopt this modernized reference system. So no, at this point, no decision's been made as far as adoption or not in Canada. But the one other piece of good news, I think, is, and while this should be really interesting for this user group, and I think really good news for this user group, is that there's developments underway within the OGC to develop standardized grid formats for exchanging geodetic data. And the US is planning to adopt these standardized grid formats as part of their modernization. So when you're looking at, for example, a geoid model in Canada and the US, right now we have our own standard representation for these grids. But the hope is that with this modernization, that both countries will adopt this international standardized grid format, and it'll make it much easier for GIS vendors or GNSS vendors to support these models in their software and in their tools. So what should geospatial users start thinking about when it comes to reference system modernization? Well, I'll just reiterate one more time. Ensuring that your metadata is accurate and complete is the most important thing. You'll also need to start thinking about whether this change of reference system or this modernization of the reference system could have an impact on you. We're welcome to hear any feedback you might have. I put our generic email address here, feedback-commentaire@cgrc.ca. And I put a few links here to further information. I didn't have a lot of time to go through the details today, but there's been some other presentations which are freely available online, and there's also a Geomatic article which is freely available and discusses more of the details of this modernization. So a few important takeaways for you. I guess first off, CGS is responsible for providing the reference system in Canada, for defining it, maintaining it, and providing access to it. And when we do this through various geodetic tools and data sets, which are publicly available, and to help you work within the adopted reference system as well as between different reference systems. And finally, the US is planning to modernize their reference system. And they're going to adopt NatRef 2022 and NatGd 2022 as early as 2024 or 2025. So you should start thinking about what this will mean for you. So I'm going to end there, but I'd be happy to try to respond to any questions you may have, or to hear any feedback that you might have on any aspects of this presentation. So thank you for your time today.
Hi, Brian.
Hello.
Welcome to GeoIgnite.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for that presentation. Last year, Calvin Klatt gave us an update. It's a pleasure to have you, Brian, here with us, giving us an update from the Geodetic Survey of Canada. So I've got a question, and also For the participants, it's a good opportunity. The Q&A is open. Please put your questions there. We're going to try to get to as many as we can. Brian, I kind of want to start with a broad question that doesn't, at a high level. So why is it so important that Canada's Geodetic Survey does what it does? What would Canadians not be able to do? What would we be missing if Canada's Geodetic Survey didn't exist?
Well, I think what's really important about what we do is providing this reference, the standard reference for the country, so that we have this reference that different geospatial users can tie their data sets to or their imagery to in Canada. If we didn't have the Geodetic Survey, Canadians would be relying on GPS alone, or they'd be relying on the international system, ITRF, or maybe the US system, and there'd be a lot less coordination amongst geospatial users within the country. So that's what our biggest role is providing the fundamental system of latitude, longitude, and heights for Canadians to use, so their data sets are interoperable and repeatable.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to go to the Q&A. We're going to go to the first question from Natalie. Do you have any involvement in the adoption of new reference frames in the provinces, territories, and municipalities?
Well, we do. This presentation was wearing one of my two hats. This was wearing my Canadian Geodetic Survey hat, but I'm also currently the chair of the Canadian Geodetic Reference System Committee, and CGS chairs this committee. So I touched on it very, very briefly, but it actually follows on with Melanie's previous talk about the Canadian Council on Geomatics, and she mentioned one of the working groups within the Canadian Council on Geomatics is this Canadian Geodetic Reference System Committee, or the CGRC. So it's really this committee, which is a working committee of federal, provincial, and territorial representatives who are responsible for geodetic reference frames in Canada, that recommends adoption of the reference frame. So we're I guess, would be the technical experts, and we'll recommend to the Canadian Council on Geomatics if we think whether or not we should adopt NatRef 2022 as an example. But it'll probably be the Canadian Council on Geomatics who will make the final decision. But it will be based probably on our recommendation.
Great, thank you.
So yeah, I guess I'll just say that it's very much a collaborative effort between us, the Canadian Geodetic Survey, and the provincial and territorial geodetic reps too, because they have a significant role to play in this.
Is there an equivalent body just for geodetic surveys across Canada for the provinces and territories for like CCOG?
Yes, well, it's this CCOG working group, this Canadian Geodetic Reference System Committee. So it's made up of the geodetic representatives within the CCOG organizations in each jurisdiction.
Okay, it's part of CCOG. Okay, great. You'd mentioned, I saw on one of your slides, working with the OGC.
Yes, well, there's a working group within. Well, I don't know if it's not an official working group at this point, but there's a group within the OGC who's looking at trying to develop a standard for geodetic grids. So these would be standard grids for different geodetic type models. So whether it's a geoid model or a velocity model or these NTV2 horizontal type transformation models. So looking at developing a standardized grid format so that there'll be models coming from different countries will be more interoperable and easier to integrate into these GIS applications.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Brian. We've come right into the break, so we're going to have to leave it here. I want to thank you and Canada's Geodetic Survey for participating in GeoIgnite.
Okay, well, thanks for having us.
All right, thank you.